Who will you trust with absolute power? That's the question. So put that in your pipe and smoke it. So we all need to deal with power. Power has been granted to each one of us. Parents need to deal with power. How do they present their power towards their children? CEOs, managers, and even in friendships, we need to deal with power. Power is a very important thing of life, and we need to consider how we deal with it and how we deal with power. Can portray us as moral or immoral. Now, to help us really think about this topic, we're going to look a little bit at the Superman franchise, the iconic character of Superman, and I want to specifically allude to 4 of the movies in recent years. When I say recent years, I mean from 1978. I know there was like a black and white Superman before that on TV. That wasn't really the Superman I grew up with, so I'm not really familiar with that guy. But the Superman that I'm really into, my first Superman that until today is even, is still the Superman, is the one by Christopher Reeve. The movie done by Richard Donner, Superman the movie, in 78, and that to me is still probably the best Superman movie for a lot of reasons. He introduced the iconic character of Superman in a whole new light after the previous portrayals. It's very true to the DC comics. And so what can we learn from Superman when it comes to the whole thing of power? But let's just first run through the 4 movies that I talk about, and then we'll come back to what we can actually learn and is there even some divine revelation in these movies that we actually look at. So I just love Christopher Reeve as Superman. He portrayed Superman. There was a kind of a weightiness to Superman, and of course Margaret Kidder as Lois Lane. I mean, I really loved her. But the best Lex Luthor there ever was, and I dare to say would be, I think is just Gene Hackman. He's just so witty, so funny. And even in his dark kind of, way, when he's busy conjuring up all kinds of, plans which can be really, really evil, he's really, really witty, and he's very, very entertaining. So the movie had a lot of humor in it. I really loved the movie. And each of these 4 movies that I want to talk about has its own angle on Superman, its own kind of interpretation and portrayal of Superman. But there's one thing that stands out through all 4 movies. Let's see if you can see ahead of time what this specific thing really is. So the second movie we can really look at is the one that came out in the 90s, Superman Returns, where the role of Superman is being played by Brandon Routh, or Ruth, depending on how you want to pronounce it. That to me was also a very good Superman, and I think this movie also tried to give homage to the previous one, the 1978 one. They used the same score by John Williams, although John Ottman did the detailed composing of the music score, but they still used in rather a lot of detail the John Williams theme. That was very, very good. Kate Bosworth as Lois Lane was also not bad. I liked her. I'm not severely critical of these movies. I'm not trying to pull them apart. In terms of the production and their cinematic angles and everything that's going on. There are great people on YouTube, that really do that, and I commend them. I love listening to them. But I've got a different purpose with looking at these movies. So the one in the 90s. Really by Bryan Singer. He was the director of that one in the 90s. Really very good. And also, Superman stays true to his character that's been portrayed in 1978. That's very important. What I like about the portrayal by Brandon Routh is the fact that Superman was a little more emotional. You could really read his emotions on his face when he's been hurt by what Lois would say to him, or when something happened that he was severely disappointed. You could see it on his face. He showed emotion. I really liked that. And of course, Kevin Spacey as Lex Luthor. He was very good. I expected a lot more of him as Lex Luthor because I really, really love Kevin Spacey as an actor. He wasn't as good doing Lex Luthor as I thought he was going to be, but he was still fine. The third movie is, of course, Man of Steel, the one with Henry Cavill, the Zack Snyder movie. That's also a very that's probably the most different kind of portrayal of the whole Superman universe. Zack Snyder has his own style. If you look at the 300 movies as well, but again, what's good about the movie is that Superman stayed true to himself. I'm very fond of Amy Adams. I don't know if she was necessarily the best Lois Lane. But of course, Man of Steel was much more, when it comes to villains, much more about General Zod. And of course, a few weeks ago, the most recent Superman movie was released, done by James Gunn as a director. A lot of humor, very funny. Ahead of time, I saw some critics that said Gunn was really overdoing it. There was too much humor, and you can do with a lot less of that. I don't know if I agree. I really loved the humor. I loved all the jokes. It was really appropriate. It was funny. The actor also, I think, was a very, very good casting decision. David Corenswet, I think, really portrays Superman very well. Not just his looks, but also the kind of moral fabric that he's made of. I'm also very fond of the Lois Lane, played by Rachel Brosnahan. As a matter of fact, I wonder if she's not really my favorite Lois Lane. I was very fond of Margaret Kidder, but I don't know. I think maybe Rachel trumps her. I'm not sure. But anyway, that's how I feel at the moment. Maybe I might feel different tomorrow. So this was really a great movie. And I like the fact that they brought in a lot of other characters as well of the DC universe. They had Mr. Terrific, they had the Green Lantern, and it was just a big party when it comes to superheroes. Now, I know the movie got a lot of criticism for that because of the fact that it was just too much, and some people feel that some of the emphasis was taken away from Superman. But I don't know, perhaps. But the one thing, coming back to our question, who can we trust with power? We see that Superman is being endowed with a lot of power. As a matter of fact, when you compare him to other superheroes, he's really supreme. He's got he's got the most severe and most complete set of superhero powers. There's nothing he cannot do. He just cannot create a cosmos. But besides that, he's almost up to anything. Nobody's a match for him, except perhaps some little bit of kryptonite, but that also doesn't happen in every movie. But the point is, compared to all the other superheroes, he's got absolute power. So who can we trust with power? So if we look at all four of these movies, and I think it's also true of the character of Superman in general. If you add the TV series of Lois and Clark and even Smallville, you see this one thing that stands out about Superman. Well, two things. The first thing is that he's got absolute power. The second thing is that he's absolutely and completely moral. He is supremely good. He's never been tempted to sway from his moral convictions. He is so good that he's actually being experienced as a bit naive. So good is he. When we remember the first movie, the one with Christopher Reeve in 78, we remember that he comes to visit Lois so that Lois can actually interview him. And at one point she asks him, "So why are you here?" And he responded by saying, "Well, to fight for truth and justice in the American way." And she scoffed at him and just laughed and said, "Oh, well, you're going to end up fighting every elected official in the country." To which he responded, "Surely you don't believe that, Lois." He's naive. He's willing to believe the best of people because he himself is really, really good. The moral fabric of which he is made is really very simplistic. It's just about saving lives to him. That's why in the most recent James Gunn movie, you also see this interview between him and Lois Lane. You see that Lois Lane confronts him, not because she tries to confront him or be difficult, but because she actually loves him. She confronts him about why he stopped the war in Eastern Europe that he actually stopped. Why did he do that? What was his motives? Did he consult with the president before he did that? Did he consult with any of the generals that was going to fight the war? What did he do? Did he get permission to actually do that? And Superman's response was just in the end, listen, people were going to die. I stopped the war. That's the point. Things are not complicated to him in a moral sense. He's very clear on what's right and what's wrong. That makes him rather simplistic, but it's also very important to the character of Superman, because if he didn't have his superpowers, perhaps we would have just, experienced him as a nerd, or as even boring, because he's just so good. He's almost annoying. But that's the very important point. If you compare him to Lex Luthor, you see that Luthor is always his antithesis. You can see what Luthor does with the power that's been given to him. What are his superpowers? Well, he's supremely rich and he's a genius. But he uses that genius in serving himself, in serving his own desires. That's very, very human. And it shows you that Lex Luthor might just be a normal person like you and I. But when he gets the freedom, when he gets the power, the ultimate power of riches and genius, what does he do with that? What would you do? How would the world look like if you would get all the powers that Lex Luthor has, or that Superman has? What would the world look like? Would you just serve your own ends? Like Lex Luthor does. And Lex is really, really evil. In the last movie, you really see it. That's the first movie that ever portrayed Lex Luthor as just holding a gun to someone's head and the guy. The previous Lex Luthors are also very, very evil, and they didn't scream. That they weren't squeamish at all to let other people lose their lives. But in this case, I was a bit doubtful initially about Nicholas Hoult as being the new Lex Luthor, but I mean, I was just 5 minutes into it, and I just thought, man, no, he's done it. He's really good, I think, as Lex Luthor, and he sells Lex Luthor as a really, really evil guy. And he just shoots this guy, and you're sort of actually shocked. So Superman and Lex Luthor are always the antithesis of one another. So Superman helps us to see the following point. He helps us to see that when you have absolute power, you need absolute morality. You need to be absolutely good. That's the kind of person that could be trusted with power. If Superman would have played in some kind of political movie, or like a cops and robbers movie, or a criminal story, someone at some point probably would have called him a Boy Scout. You see that all the time. If a person is so good, it's very easy to berate the person by calling him, you're such a Boy Scout. And it's just a way of saying, yeah, we want you to be good, but we don't want you to be too good. We want you to be good enough to help people, but we want you to be good enough to kill people as well, if need be. Now, I don't want to get into the complexities of what that entails morally, but here's the point of Superman. The only person that can really be trusted with absolute power is a person that's absolutely good. Now, as a Christian pastor, I have a lot of friends, a lot of skeptic friends as well, that are really hesitant to consider the Christian narrative for understandable reasons, because to trust a deity with so much power is just, it's just too difficult, because a lot of religions do a lot of bad things, and also religion can disappoint. But if you look at the life of Jesus, you see really that here is someone with ultimate power that voluntarily lays down his power. He hangs on the cross for saving his enemies. From the cross, he delivers the words, "Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they do." That is the kind of leader I think you can trust. And so when he was with his disciples, and when he was the most powerful person in the room, if we take John 13, where he sits with his disciples, we see that he really loved them to the extreme. He's the most powerful person in the room. And what does he do? He takes off his cloak and he starts playing the role of a slave by washing the feet of his disciples. That's what real leaders do. They wash the feet of the people around them. That's one thing. In John chapter 18, we see that Jesus voluntarily gives himself over to the authorities. He had the authority to withstand that. He had the authority to blow them away, to turn around, and to he had the decision, the choice not to fulfill his mission. Now, you see that in at least two of the Superman movies as well. You see it in Man of Steel. You see how Superman voluntarily gives himself over to the military authorities for questioning. Someone that's got a lot of power doesn't need to do that, but he does that because he's a servant of the community. He understands the fear of the people. In the most recent movie with David Corenswet, you see exactly the same. He voluntarily gives himself over for questioning, and so that people could really question his motives and even his actions. Was it really good to do what he did? Now, that's very important. That's very profound to the Christian narrative. And what's really interesting is what the superhero movies portray to us is that we as humans seem to have this need to be able to really, really unconditionally trust a powerful person. We don't stop telling stories like that. We also don't stop telling stories where great authorities betray us and where they didn't live up to the values that they were supposed to have. But the need that we have is really, really profound. And I would dare to say that we really need someone who has all the power sometimes to trust. And so now that doesn't mean that there aren't people that are also really morally good and that can also be trusted with power. We just should be very, very sure of their character. So Alexander Solzhenitsyn said that the line between good and evil goes through every human heart. And you see that with Superman. You see that he doesn't adhere or position himself in terms of any country politically, although he's, of course, a proud American. He doesn't have a problem with that. He doesn't portray himself as in terms of political parties or even in kinds of culture wars. All that he knows is that he needs to be good and he needs to save the lives of people. So back to these questions. Who would you trust with ultimate power? I would love to know what you think, so please leave your comments in the comment section below. And please remember to subscribe to the channel. We all know that we help each other. You would help me if you subscribe, and I could provide much more content for you to consider if it is what you indeed like. Until next time.